Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dungeon Dive. Daniel here. I hope you're doing well, and if you're not, I hope you are soon. Okay, in today's episode, we have two, I guess you could call them total conversion mods for Mork Borg, and that is Ronin, and this was recently delivered from Kickstarter, and I was a backer of Ronin. And we also have Castaway, which is a little bit older. I just haven't gotten a chance to do a video on Castaway yet. And this one I was not a backer of, but I did order it. And you can still get the hardback book from Monomyth. So if you just Google Castaway and Monomyth, you'll find the place where you can buy this. I don't know where this is available for retail yet, but I'm sure it will be. Most of the Mork Borg stuff is. So we're going to take just kind of a flip through and a preliminary look at both of these total conversion mods that are 100% compatible with Mork Borg. I haven't played either of these yet, but I've read through them and I thought about them, and I do have some thoughts, and I'm really looking forward to playing both of these. But I think not to bury the lead here, but I think I prefer Castaway, especially because of its really clever solo rules. So let's take a look at Castaway first. Okay, first up, we will take a look at Castaway. And as the name suggests, Castaway is a Mork Borg supplement or a total conversion mod for playing games where you are stranded on a deserted island. If you already have Pirate Borg and some Pirate Borg stuff, this might be kind of a perfect little supplement for Pirate Borg for when your pirate has a ship malfunction, their ship gets crashed upon a reef or something, and it gets destroyed, and your pirates are trapped on an island. Then you can maybe switch over to Castaway, and it's a really interesting game. And I think the solo rules, Stranded, are also super interesting. And there is actually one page in the solo rules that is kind of a master class in how to design solo rules for a solo RPG. Really cool. So we'll make sure to take a look at that. But you guys know that I like to focus on the character sheet when I am first looking at an RPG. I think the character sheet can really give us a good glimpse into what kind of game we are about to play. And that's also true with video games. When an RPG comes out, a new RPG or an action RPG or a Souls-like game, I always like to see the pause screen or the character screen, the inventory screen. And I'm always shocked by how often those screens are left out of any kind of preview coverage, because you can learn a lot about a game, especially an RPG, by just looking at what you can do with your character. And already here we have a really good clue that Castaway is a little more complex than just your standard Mork Borg. Because standard Mork Borg, your character sheet would look something like this, one page. But with Castaway, we actually have a 2-page character sheet. And that's because at its core, Castaway is a survival game. And so you do need to think about a few more things. There are a few more mechanisms in Castaway than there are in a standard game of Mork Borg. However, it's really not any more complex. The things that it adds are easy. They're easy layers. They're additional layers of easy things to remember. So already we have these debilitating afflictions. Because this is a survival game, you have to deal with things like starvation, dehydration, chills, heat stroke, scurvy, infection, poisoned, bleeding, cabin fever, and sunburn. And because you are a castaway and you are on a deserted island, you also want to make your escape plan. And you want to keep your fire lit, and you have to worry about storage and your camp structure. So there is this focus on the survival element. And I know people really do like their survival RPGs lately. And I think this is a really good entry into that space. But now let's take a look through the book. And a lot of what's presented here, fans of Mork Borg will recognize. It's not completely different, but there are enough different things that I think make this kind of stand out from the crowd. We have our sheets here on our cover sheets where we have some different tables, some things that are washed ashore, watch your step. These are kind of like random encounters, things you might appear in the dead of night, or some resource complications, such as maybe their subpar materials. So the materials you find, maybe the wood you find is kind of rotted or things like that. But it begins with a little introduction, and then you are washed ashore, and then you go through the steps of kind of setting up your island and setting up your character, what kind of weapons you might find. I think this is pretty funny, this weapon here. If you roll a 1, you have a coconut, and it's easy to throw and break and still makes for a tasty snack. So you might just wind up with a coconut for a weapon. You have the clothes on your back, and then you have your typical Mork Borg abilities: agility, presence, strength, and toughness. And the tests, none of the mechanisms are really different in Castaway. It's just kind of how they are presented. And here we have all of our rules about combat. Again, combat is exactly the same as in Mork Borg, but then we get into our debilitating afflictions. So the island wears away at your body and mind slowly but steadily. Pain and death lurk in the most mundane of injuries and come easily to those that don't care for their afflictions. And as your afflictions build up, you will also have to worry about your fatigue, and you can get completely fatigued. And once that happens, your character is pretty much useless. But you can rest to restore your fatigue, and you can heal your afflictions. And that's kind of what you want to do as you are playing this game, as you are working on your survival. But yeah, this is a really neat game. It goes through about making your camp and the kinds of things you'll have to do for hunting and gathering and crafting. And then it goes into the rules for the fatigue, for your fatigue system, and then what you have to do for rest and relaxation. And I think this section here is really cool as well, the doldrums. So instead of the miseries, instead of the world ending, this has a doldrums system where your character can just kind of be afflicted with malaise and become depressed and maybe just succumb to living on this island. I'm not lost. This is where I live now, or something like that. But you also want to come up with your escape route, or your escape plan, or your rescue plan. And so those each have a difficulty rating, and you will be working towards those as you are playing. And of course, because it is a survival game, you will also have to be aware of the weather, and inclemental weather can make things very, very difficult. And then here we get into our standard bestiary for Castaway. We have sharks and piranhas, the skull-cap jaguar, island boar, sand ants, man traps, a howling baby, and then the others. Lost fans. I'm a huge fan of Lost, even the ending. I think the ending of Lost is I think Lost is a show that, for me, gets better with every season. The death macaw, the camellosaur, the shipwreck hermit crab, the stingfish, and yes, like if you have Pirate Borg, mixing in your pirate bestiary to make this a little more fantastic would definitely be something that I would want to do. But a pretty big bestiary. The bestiary is extensive and it's interesting. And then here we have some of the mysteries of the island. So Temple of the Molten God. These are just kind of some places that you might want to populate, some points of interest that you might want to populate on your deserted island. And you can come up with a whole story about the background, if there are any kinds of temples or anything you might find buried within the dirt there. Here we have a sample island, a drifting island, and kind of just some ways to make some island adventures so you can easily get started on that. But we also have Stranded, and these are the solo rules for Castaway. And they're pretty basic. I think Solitary Defilement as a whole is a better package of solo rules. But there is one page in this solo supplement that I think should be kind of a Bible, or I want to print it out and make a poster of this one page because it's so useful. But here we have our start. So we have 3 ways that your character can start on this island. And then we have when you arrive on the island, you can take a look around, and this will help you establish your setting. What kind of island is it? What are its features, just so you can kind of get your bearings as a player and as the GM, so you know what you are dealing with and what kind of things you will have to deal with. And here we get into that really amazing couple of pages here. The flow of play. So time is important. In a survival game, time is important. So it tells you how to keep track of time. But right here, this page right here is one of the most useful and succinct pages I've ever seen in a solo RPG. I love this so much. Let's take a detailed look at this. So, decision making. If you're heading into or end up in some sort of situation that has a more open ended narrative, think in terms of giving yourself decisions to describe the scene. Limit your options by plotting risks and rewards for each path you take. The thread of fate, however, are not yours. The threads of fate, however, are not yours to control. Did you think you were getting off that easy? So, let's say that our character has approached a cliff, and at the top of that cliff is some fruit trees, and we need that food. We are hungry. This is the first food we found on the island, and that cliff has a waterfall flowing down it. It's very steep, jagged rocks. There are some vines growing, and so we can approach this situation in using these rules, using this outline here. So roll for the available paths. Let's see how many paths we have forward in this situation, in this encounter. Okay, a 3. So you see 2 options in front of you. Choose wisely. Okay, so the 2 options we could lay out, we could say we could scale the jagged rocks up near the waterfall, or over to one side, there is a steep incline, but it's really gravelly with loose gravel. And so it would be pretty difficult to scramble up that incline. We could look at the incline as maybe an agility test, and we could look at climbing up the vines or the rocks as a strength test. So those are 2 different ways that we could approach the situation. And now each path you plot has an obstacle, a benefit, a drawback, a consequence, and a reward. This right here is really how we should be approaching all of our solo RPGs. These 5 things: the obstacle, what's the challenge? The benefit, why are we going through with this? If there's not a benefit, then why do it? The drawback, what is going to cause the drama here? What makes this exciting? And that also ties in with the consequence. What happens if we fail? And the reward, what happens if we succeed? It's so succinct. It's so just bold right there, how we should approach every problem in a solo RPG. I love this page so much. So the obstacle is the cliff. The benefit, something about the situation that is to your advantage. Okay, so maybe your character is armed with some gloves, and that might help them scramble up the vines more than it would help them scramble up the incline. With gloves, you could climb easier, and they wouldn't really benefit you to scramble up loose gravel. What's the drawback? The drawback would be the steepness of the cliffs, or that loose gravel which would make it easy to slide down. The drawback could also tie in with the consequence. If you were to slide down an incline, the consequences wouldn't be as bad if you were to fall from a sheer face of a cliff. And so you can think of it in terms of that. The consequence could be more damage doing it the hard way, and less damage doing it the easy way, but your character is more geared up and maybe more skilled for the hard way. And then what's the reward? What happens if you succeed? You get that food. You get what you need to survive. So just a really clear, concise way to present this kind of thing in a solo RPG. I love that. And then here we have how to come up with different difficulty ratings, and then failure. What happens if you fail based on that difficulty rating? So just a really cool system. This slim volume has a lot to offer. Here we have different types of conflict and things that you can do for running away, different ways to deal with conflict, different ways to deal with companions, and then possibly some kind of nemesis on the island. And we have a self-improvement rules, an exploration generator in the distance you see. To get there, you must. And then you have to suffer through to do that. By land, by sea, or that. Avoid or defeat. So these are your monsters. You can roll up your kind of combat encounters, your violent encounters. D20 things to overcome. And then finally, going home. And then a brief encapsulation, a brief overview of everything that's in this book. So the Stranded Solo Rules, and these are by Matthew Chamis, and same as the game here by Matthew Chamis, with graphic design and art by Dalton Shaw, Matthew Chamis, and Dead People. So a really nice package here, especially if you're already kind of invested in Pirate Borg. I think these 2 things work really well together. Okay, next up we have Ronin, and Ronin is a Mork Borg full conversion mod for fans of things like Lone Wolf and Cub, or Ninja Scroll, or maybe the Sunny Chiba samurai resurrection movies for kind of mystical samurai, pan-Asian, Japanese influenced role playing. If you like any of those things, you will feel right at home with Ronin. Let's take a look at Ronin's character sheet and see what details we can glean from it. So first off, right off the bat, we have a single page character sheet. So this is a little closer to your bread and butter Mork Borg. We have things like name, your class, description, features, your texts. These are basically your scrolls, your spells. And then our stats have just kind of changed names to be more thematic to this world. We have swiftness, spirit, vigor, and resilience. We do have a new system here called honor, and this is really interesting. I like this system a lot. As your character acts in honorable ways, you might gain benefits. NPCs might treat you differently. And you can also become dishonorable. And there are a number of different paths of honor that your characters can follow. And this is in addition to any class. So you can mix and match these paths of honor with different classes. Really cool. These cards were a bonus for Kickstarter. All of this information is also presented in the book, so you don't need these cards. But the different paths of honor are the Sumo's Oath, the Unseen Virtues, Bushido, the Sword Saint's Discipline, the Ronin's Creed, the Rules of the Divine, the Noble Truths, the Dancer's Code, the Gambler's Way, and the Yamabusha's Path. And what's pretty cool about this is because of this this samurai aspect of this game, that this honor culture mechanism, and if your character dies and they have 10 or more honor, they die in an honorable way. And you actually get to pass on some positive traits to your next character. So you're kind of creating this family lineage, this bloodline. Your next character will be a little stronger. If you die with a dishonor, if you die with less than 10 honor, then you pass on a dishonorable trait to your next character, and your character starts a little weaker with a disadvantage. I think that is really neat. I like that system a lot. It's simple and it's effective. And because we're dealing with honor in this game, we will also be dealing with ritualistic suicide with seppuku. There is a warning at the beginning of the book to let people know that this game does deal with ritualistic suicide. So if that's not something you want to participate in, you may want to avoid Ronin. Personally, I have had 3 close friends and 2 acquaintances kill themselves, die of suicide. And so I treat this subject with a lot of respect. It's terrible, it's depressing, it's sad, it's tragic. However, I am also okay with it being used in a work of fiction. I'm not opposed to that, but some people might be, and that's perfectly okay. But there are ways to perform your ritualistic suicide in the game. There are mechanisms for it in order to restore your dishonorable character's honor so they can die with honor. And I think that's pretty interesting. So let's start taking a look at the book here. In typical Mork Borg fashion, you will open up the book to a whole bunch of cool tables. We have different names. Hey, a Japanese name table. I like that. Remember, I was wanting something like that for the Unseen World. We have a D12 shrines, treasure weather, shogun's demands, debilitating injuries, encounters, corpse plundering, and traps. And let's see what's on the back cover here. We have kind of a basic overview of all of our rules. So it is a simpler game than Castaway, but I think there are a few layers of complications that make it different than Mork Borg. So when we start, we'll get our lore pages. And this takes place in the world of Kage no Shima. And so here we have all of our just our lore pages about the background. Now, I will say that some of the text in this book is really, really tiny, minuscule, and it's kind of italicized and not bold. So some of the things in this book are really hard to read. And I know that's kind of a weird thing to complain about because Mork Borg itself can sometimes be hard to read, but I went back through my Mork Borg book and just saw that the basic text where the rules are is usually bold. It's much easier to read than it is in this book. I think just the font and the fact that a lot of the font isn't bolded and a lot of the font is italicized, and the font that they chose just makes the smaller text hard to read. And it wasn't like they were just trying to cram a whole bunch of words on a page. There's a lot of empty space here. And I think the problem with that is that a lot of modern designers, they're not thinking about how their words will appear on a printed page because they're doing all of their work on their desktop publishing software, and everything is zoomed in and they can see everything clearly on their giant monitors, and that they don't think about it. In the same way that a lot of modern board gamers do all of their prototyping on virtual tabletops like Tabletop Simulator, and they don't have really any concept of the amount of space their game will take up in meat space. So just something to think about, designers. Think about your words and the size of your text, because there's still a lot of us old people playing these games. The demographic for the Dungeon Dive, I think, is 40 and over. So yeah, RPGs aren't just a young man's game, but still, some of the spreads, some of the page designs look really cool. We have our history on the Shogunate and the Ronin Brotherhood, the ninjas, the Shadow Clan there, and the Iron Monks. We have our miseries here, and that's called the Black Calendar. So like Mork Borg, you will have 7 miseries, and once your world has reached that 7th misery, then that world comes to an end. So that campaign is over. And then we get into our character creation. You can either make a character from the beginning and they'll be a little stronger, or you can choose a class which will have some predefined stats and abilities, and they might have extra powers. And there are 10 different classes: Forgotten Ronin, the Erudite Samurai, the Drunken Monk, the Corrupt Shinobi, the Onmyoji, the Bakuto, the Yamabushi, the Wild Dancer. I love this spread here. So cool. That looks like one of my favorite movies, the Pangu, this mix of Japanese and West samurai and Western, and also Charles Bronson's Red Sun and the Master Gunfighter. So, of course, if you have your Shadows of Brimstone Forbidden Fortress stuff, that could be really handy for this game. We have our Reckless Sumo and our Sword Saint. And then we get into our rules about honor and all of our creeds here, all of our different paths of honor that we looked at with those cards. So you don't need the cards. Your beginning possessions, because like in Mork Borg, your characters start with only what's on their back, what they can carry. We have our equipment and our armor, and then our weapons page here. So shurikens, tantos, bows, nunchucks, kasurigamas, wakazashis, naganatas, tangashima, and a katana. And then here we get into our scrolls, our text. So these are basically our spells, our clean and unclean. We have like Whirlwind Blade, a Visions from Beyond, the Steel Barrier, and our Kami's Revenge. This is a page where, man, that text is so small, so hard to read. I have a really difficult time reading the white text on that page. And our equipment, so all of the things we can buy, people we can hire, different services and weapons, and then how to use your honor. And here we have a nice little warning. Say, hey, the next page deals with suicide. And you could probably skip that if you resonate with the theme, but you don't want to experience that kind of ritualistic suicide in your game, just skip it. Maybe come up with something different. But you can kill yourself and then be resurrected, or you can pass on some traits to your lineage. Really cool. I like that system a lot. We get into our rules about fighting. Zatoichi there. But you can parry. So there's a little more to the combat because it's kind of dealing with some martial arts, of course. So the combat's a little more detailed, a little more complex than standard Mork Borg. And not only can you parry, but there are also rules for duels, because dueling is another way that you can save your honor. So interesting. You can rest, you can meditate for when you want to get better, for your chances to improve, and you can meet a sensei to get taught. Your virtues, these are your omens. You can write haiku for certain things. And here we have some tables for some bad things that might happen to you. Broken bodies, your grim chronicles, your bad habits, and your awful afflictions. And then we get into a bestiary. So we have our oni, our nue, our yuki ona, your bandits. So a nice mix of supernatural and mundane, I think. I would have liked to have seen the bestiary to be expanded just a little bit. It feels just a little bit slim, but I'm sure there will be dedicated bestiaries to Ronin, because there's a lot of people out there who do really like this theme. Actually, I guess the bestiary is a little bit more extensive than I thought. Yeah, I'll give that a pass. I think on second thought, I'm changing my mind. I think the bestiary looks pretty cool. The Nightingale, the Iron Fist. That's a really cool page there. The Blood Witch and the Death Blade. Yeah, pretty cool. All right, I'm changing my mind on the bestiary. We have our index here. So our lore index, creatures and yokai, yomi demons, legendary creatures, character creation, and rules. A really nice index, very well presented with just about all of the information you would need to find what you are looking for quickly. And then here we have a little introductory adventure by Camilla Mera. I forgot to mention who wrote Ronin here, but Sacha Lightfoot with graphic design and layout by Dominique Riozzi. So we have a little introductory adventure written by Camilla Mera. And Camilla Mera also wrote an adventure that you can get called Frozen Tears of the Lady of the Snow. So kind of a Lady Snowblood adventure here. Lady Snowblood. Very cool. This is a really nice little adventure. I think it looks cool. Very well designed as far as the page layouts go. And then we also have our solo rules for Ronin, and that is Tales of the Masterless. So the solo rules here, I think, are kind of a stripped down version of Solitary Defilement. It uses moves like Solitary Defilement does. It uses strong hits, weak hits, and fails. And so if you are familiar with Solitary Defilement, you will feel right at home here. And it also kind of incorporates some of that the traveling rules from Mork Borg Ferritory. So it's a little kind of a stripped down combination of the stuff from Solitary Defilement and from the Ferritory. So if you know both of those, you'll be able to pick this up really quickly. We have things you can discover along the trail, events, different geographical features, campsite events, off the beaten path, settlements, core locations, crowd sizes. And then when you want to go hunting, you can do hunting and gathering and fishing. There are some beasts that you can hunt. You can go fishing. So you could take your games of Fiskborg and go fishing here in Ronin. Different ways to roll up NPCs with different creeds and dueling, taste and odor, useful items, more oracles for sound. And that's it. It's a little slim. I would have liked maybe 6 more pages or so. Actually, we skipped one section here on dungeon crawling. So there is a section on creating your kind of temples and ruins and dungeons that you might explore with some different rooms, how to roll up your exits and everything. And then also we have our room content. So room descriptors, room type, room contents, and then your final room contents. And that would be your objective room, what you are trying to find in that dungeon. But overall, a pretty nice package. I like this theme. I like things like Zampangu, and I like Zatoichi and Lone Wolf and Cub and Ninja Scroll and all of that stuff. You know, as a child of the 80s, I'm from the Just Add Ninja generation. And so this was kind of a no-brainer for me. And I'm pretty happy with it. I wish that the text was a little bigger and more readable in the main book. And I wish that the solo rules were just a little bit more robust. But this is something that we can easily add to, so that doesn't bother me too much. The small and hard to read text in the book is something I'm a little more concerned with. I might end up taking my digital copy and printing it on 8.5 by 11 sheets and then putting that in a book to make it a little more usable while I am playing. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this look at Ronin and Castaway, 2 new total conversion mods for Mork Borg, and we will talk to you later. Bye-bye.